Have you ever found yourself caught in that classic travel trap? You know, you spend hours looking for hotel deals, you plan everything out meticulously, and you feel this real buzz of excitement when you finally hit book. You think, yes, I got a fantastic getaway.
Yeah.
Then you actually get there, and that initial, like, happy glow, it just starts to fade slowly, maybe a bit creepily. It gets replaced by this growing sense of unease. You get hit with one unexpected charge, then another, and another one after that, until you realize the trick you thought you'd planned so carefully is actually costing you way more. And that initial joy, it's turned into something, well, closer to frustration or maybe even feeling a little bit ripped off. So today, we're diving deep into a place that, I mean, for decades has been all about both that over-the-top luxury and, let's be real, a kind of audacious approach to pricing, the legendary Las Vegas Strip. For so many people, it's the ultimate escape, right? A place where reality gets put on hold and indulgence is basically the point. But here's the thing. The surprising news, or maybe, if you've been recently, maybe not so surprising, Las Vegas, is actually seeing a pretty significant and sustained decline in tourism and sales. Now, for a city that literally lives and breathes on bringing in millions of visitors month after month after month, that's not just like a small concern. It's a major shift. So our mission today is to take this stack of sources you've pulled together, articles, research reports, and really unpack what's happening on the Strip. Is it just that everything costs more? Is it the sheer number of fees kind of piling up like chips on a losing hand? Or is there something, I don't know, more subtle going on? A psychological tipping point, maybe, about how visitors see the value versus what they're actually paying. We're going to try and get to the bottom of what's driving this downturn.
Yeah, and what's really insightful here, I think, is this idea of a pain threshold for consumers. It's not just the total amount of these charges we're looking at. It's the sheer frequency and maybe more importantly, the unexpectedness of them that seems to be pushing visitors past some kind of psychological breaking point. It can really transform what feels like a luxury experience into something that feels more like, I don't know, a tax on enjoyment. It just chips away at trust. And Las Vegas, a city built on delivering these incredible, unparalleled experiences, it really seems to be finding out where that delicate limit is right now in real time. It might be pushing its long-standing appeal past a critical boundary.
Exactly. And look, whether you're maybe planning a Vegas trip yourself, or you're just keeping a close eye on the travel industry, or maybe you're just really curious about how consumer feelings can dramatically shake up an iconic place like this deep dive, we hope, will give you a shortcut to understanding the big forces at play and hopefully give you those aha moments you're looking for. So let's jump right into the numbers that really get this whole conversation started. Okay, let's start by grounding ourselves in some pretty stark facts. These come straight from your sources. The headline reality is that Las Vegas is in a sustained tourism decline. And when I say sustained, I really mean it. We're talking about the sixth straight month of lower visitor numbers and sales. Now, for those of us who kind of grew up with this image of Vegas as this unstoppable economic force, right? A city that always seemed to be booming, always expanding, always pulling people in with this promise of escape and endless entertainment. Well, this is genuinely significant. It really felt for so long like Vegas was almost immune to the usual economic bumps or shifts in travel habits. Remember the 2008 financial crisis? Vegas definitely felt it, sure, but it bounced back with incredible strength, pushing ahead with new resorts, new attractions. Even during other recessions, the city often found ways to just reinvent itself, keep the lights blazing and the crowds coming. But what does it really mean when, for half a year, month after month, those bright lights seem to dim just a little and the visitor numbers keep sliding downwards? This doesn't feel like just a minor seasonal thing or, a quick market correction. This long period, it strongly suggests something much more fundamental is shifting under all that glitter. It hints at a deeper, maybe more systemic issue that we really need to look at closely.
You've really nailed a crucial point there about Vegas's historical resilience. And what truly stands out to me is that 6 consecutive months of decline isn't just, an anomaly. It's a really strong signal of a systemic issue. 1 month, maybe a statistical blip, 2 or 3. Okay, maybe a temporary market thing like a big convention didn't happen that year or a holiday timing shift. But when you see a consistent downturn over half a year, that becomes undeniably indicative of more fundamental shifts. We're talking about changes in how visitors behave, how they perceive the destination, or maybe a significant erosion in the whole value proposition of going to Las Vegas. From an economic standpoint, yeah, a trend like this demands serious attention. It suggests that whatever's driving this decline isn't just temporary, it's kind of baked into the current market dynamics. It signals that the city might be losing its competitive edge in the broader tourism world. Or maybe that visitors' expectations are changing and Vegas isn't quite meeting them anymore. It forces the industry to ask some hard questions. Is the basic appeal of Las Vegas being challenged? And if it is, what's doing the challenging? This kind of persistent data often comes before major strategic rethinkings within an industry.
That's a really powerful way to put it, to challenge the foundational appeal. Okay, so let's dig into the specifics then, because your sources, they pulled directly from the LVCVA, that's the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority, and they were reported by the Las Vegas Review-Journal. They give us some really granular data. These aren't just vague feelings or, stories people tell. These are hard numbers, and they paint a very clear picture. Okay, for example, let's talk hotels. Room occupancy rates are a really key measure of how full hotels are. They're off by a noticeable 7.6 percentage points. They're now sitting at 76.1%. That's a pretty significant chunk of empty rooms compared to how things used to be. And it's not just that fewer rooms are booked. At the same time, the average daily room rate, the ADR, basically the average price paid per room each day, that's also down 3.4%, sitting at $155. Now, for you listening, a lower room rate might sound good at first, right? Like, oh, maybe I can get a deal, but let's see how that fits into the bigger, more complicated picture. But it's not just about the hotels. Think about the main gateway to the city. Harry Reid International Airport. Passenger traffic, I mean, that's the lifeblood of Vegas tourism, right? It's down 4.4%. And it has consistently shown declines every single month since January. Just think about what that means. Fewer people are even arriving in the city in the first place. That points to a broader lack of interest, or maybe people shifting away from Vegas as their go-to spot. And then, maybe the most critical number from the industry's viewpoint, we have revenue per available room, or RevPR. This is a huge profitability measure. It includes both gambling and non-gambling money, basically. How much revenue each available room brings in, whether it's from the casino, restaurants, shows, spas, whatever. And that number, it's down a pretty significant 8.5%. That's a big hit right across the board to the resort's entire business model.
Yeah. The collective weight of these numbers, it really shines a light on the depth of the challenge Vegas is facing. Let's maybe break down why each one, especially when you see them together, sends such a strong message. First off, that simultaneous drop in both occupancy and the average room rate. That's particularly telling. See, if only occupancy was down, hotels might try to hold their rates steady, right? Fewer guests, but maybe more profit per guest. But when the rates are also dropping, it suggests they're struggling to fill rooms even when they offer lower prices. This isn't just a little dip in demand. It points to a significant and probably growing problem in actually attracting visitors. It forces properties to actively discount just to try and entice people in, and they're still falling short on filling rooms, like a double whammy, hitting their main revenue stream hard. And that continuous drop in airport traffic, it directly backs up the overall visitor downturn, definitely. But importantly, it often acts as a leading indicator. This isn't just about people choosing, say, a different hotel on the Strip or maybe staying off-Strip. It's about fewer people making the basic decision to travel to Las Vegas at all. This broad decline in arrivals is a really powerful signal of a fundamental shift, either in destination preference or maybe accessibility or how people perceive the value. It suggests a drop in the actual intent to visit. And that has really profound long-term implications for the city's whole tourism economy, affecting everything from hotel bookings to conventions to just the general vitality of the local economy. And that RevPAR number, down almost 9%. That's arguably the most holistic and concerning metric of the bunch. RevPAR is kind of the gold standard for measuring a hotel's financial health because it blends occupancy and room rates. But in Vegas, it's even more critical because it broadly reflects profitability for the entire resort property. That includes revenue from the casino floor, obviously, but also from that huge array of restaurants, the world-class shows, fancy spas, high-end shops, nightclubs, all the stuff that's become increasingly vital to the Strip's diversified business model over the years. So yeah, an 8.5% drop in RevPAR isn't just about empty rooms or quiet blackjack tables. It really speaks to the entire Las Vegas ecosystem feeling a significant pinch. It means both the core gambling business and those extensive, often high-margin non-gaming things are struggling. It suggests that even the visitors who do come might be spending less overall, or maybe just the lower number of visitors is having this knock-on damaging effect on all revenue streams. It indicates that the whole intricate financial machine of these resorts, which are basically like small cities, is taking a substantial hit.
Wow. So for you, our listener, this really paints a pretty stark picture, doesn't it? A city that seems to be struggling to pull in its usual crowds. Fewer people are picking Las Vegas, and yeah, while you might see a slightly lower average room rate advertised, that is definitely not the whole story. The big numbers are certainly worrying for the industry. But what about those everyday friction points? The kind of charges that just creep up on you, maybe not when you first book, but while you're actually there. What else are visitors running into that might be stopping them from making the trip or from having that truly memorable experience everyone talks about? It suggests that the perceived value of a Vegas trip is being chipped away by something beyond just that initial booking price. Which brings us right into looking closer at those less obvious, often hidden, or maybe just less advertised costs that seem to be piling up. Literally, as one source put it, shaking guests until every last dime falls out. Okay, let's talk about those daily friction points, those less obvious costs. Your sources really hammer home this pervasive trend that seems to have gotten much worse after the pandemic. Prices and fees across the strip have just surged. Resorts, according to one report, have, quote, quietly found new ways to shake their customers' pockets until every last dime falls out.
Mm. It's pretty blunt language. It's not just a vague feeling travelers have. It sounds like an observable and maybe even aggressive strategy.
Mm.
And here's where we get a really vivid picture from a very specific and I think relatable personal story from one of your sources. The author, who used to be a really frequent Vegas visitor, for years, he could get comped rooms at Caesars properties most nights, meaning his room was often free because he was a loyal customer and gambled a fair bit. He reveals he drastically cut back his strip visits. And guess what the final straw was for this high-value customer? It was when the cost of his daily Starbucks latte hit nearly $12 for a medium coffee. And he specifically points out that's more than double what he pays for the exact same coffee back home in Florida. We're not talking about some fancy meal or a high roller expense here. It's a simple, everyday, almost boring purchase.
But for him, it became this clear sign that the whole value equation had just fundamentally broken down.
That Starbucks story is incredibly powerful, actually, because it speaks directly to a very real psychological threshold for people. It makes you ask, right, from a business strategy angle, where is that line? When does a reasonable premium, which, okay, maybe you expect in a unique place like Vegas for convenience or location, when does that cross over into feeling like you're being unfairly ripped off? What some people are flat out calling price gouging. I mean, we might grumble, but accept airport-style pricing, right? Inflated costs where you're kind of captive, like at an airport with limited options. But there's definitely a point beyond which consumers feel genuinely taken advantage of. And that perception, even if it's subjective, even if it's not based on a purely rational cost breakdown, it's absolutely critical. It directly hits the overall customer experience, their satisfaction level, and, crucially, whether they'll ever want to come back. If every small incidental thing, like getting a bottle of water or just grabbing a coffee, was like another little tax on your enjoyment, it can systematically sour the whole trip. Doesn't matter how great the main attractions are, it slowly chips away at any goodwill the brand might have built up. It turns that feeling of indulgence into one of constantly watching your wallet. It's about reference pricing too, isn't it? When you know what that same thing costs elsewhere, the markup feels particularly harsh.
And it's definitely not just coffee, as that story shows. Those more established, bigger fees, like the infamous resort fees. They're not only back everywhere, but they've also been jacked up at many places. On top of that, parking fees, remember they suspended those for a while during the pandemic to try and lure people back. Well, they've now returned across many of the major properties. Now, these aren't necessarily hidden when you book. I mean, if you dig into the fine print, you'll find them. But they certainly add up fast, and they really inflate the final cost way beyond what a lot of people expect. Let's give you some concrete numbers straight from the sources so you can actually factor this in if you're thinking about a trip. If you're driving, you need to be ready for these costs. At MGM Resorts, and that includes a huge list, right? Bellagio, Aria, MGM Grand, Mandalay Bay, Luxor, Excalibur, New York, Park MGM, Vidara, Cosmopolitan self-parking is $20 a day, Monday through Thursday. Then it jumps to $25 a day for Friday through Sunday. If you're actually staying at the hotel, it's a flat $20 a day. And okay, you do get in and out privileges. Small mercy, maybe, but valet parking, if you want that convenience, that'll set you back a hefty $40 per day. And Caesars Entertainment, the other giant on the strip, covering places like Caesars Palace, Paris, Flamingo, Harrah's, Horseshoe, LANQ, Planet Hollywood, Cromwell, they have very similar rates. Their self-parking is $20 a day Monday through Wednesday. It goes up to $25 a day Thursday through Sunday. Hotel guests also pay that flat $20 a day with in-out access. And their valet, also $40 a day. So look, these aren't small occasional charges. These are substantial daily fees that pile up incredibly quickly. They add a considerable chunk to your overall budget, especially if you're staying for, say, 3 or 4 nights and you need your car.
Yeah, and the way these parking fees are structured, especially when you look at the perks they offer to try and soften the blow for certain groups, it reveals a really interesting strategic element, like Nevada locals. They get 3 hours of free parking. That's a nod to the local community, keeps them happy. But more importantly, the loyalty program members specifically, MGM Rewards Pearl Tier and higher, and Caesars Rewards Platinum Tier and higher, they qualify for free self-parking or even free valet at the higher tiers. Now, if we step back and connect this to the bigger picture, what these tiered perk systems actually do is create a really stark division among visitors. So while the loyal high-tier customers, basically, the ones who spend a lot of money gambling or on other things, they get rewarded generously. But the average visitor, or someone visiting for the first time, they bear the full brunt of these rising fees. This strategy, it seems aimed at keeping those high-value customers coming back, sure, but it might unintentionally create a major disincentive for repeat visits, or even first-time visits from the broader market. It risks alienating a huge segment of potential visitors who feel like they aren't getting the same value as the regulars or the big spenders. And that could potentially shrink the overall pool of tourists over time. It kind of turns Vegas from this accessible fantasy into more of a tiered privilege system, and that shift could have really big long-term consequences for a place built on mass appeal.
So for you, our listener, planning that trip means you can't just look at the advertised room rate or the flight costs anymore. You have to meticulously factor in potentially another $20 to $40 per day just for parking. And that's on top of those resort fees everyone already complains about. How does that kind of significant, often less obvious cost change your overall budget? And how does it change your perception of the deal you think you're getting, especially when you compare it to other destinations that might not layer on these daily charges? It's not just a tiny increase, it's a substantial jump in your daily spending, just to keep your car nearby. It fundamentally shifts the perceived entry cost of a Vegas vacation. But the fee frenzy, it gets even more granular. It goes beyond just parking and resort fees. Your sources point out other examples of crazy inflated costs for what most of us would consider basic stuff, bordering on what some are calling shady pricing. We're talking about a mind-boggling $26 for a single bottle of water from your hotel minibar, or maybe even a convenience store on the Strip.
But
Just let's let that sink in. $26 for water. And then there's a $60 fee just for checking in early, which, let's face it, is a pretty common need if you arrive on a morning flight. These are fundamental things for travelers: hydration, getting into your room, and suddenly they come with these huge, often unexpected price tags that can feel truly exploitative.
Yeah, what really strikes me here is that these aren't just isolated incidents, right? Or minor annoyances you can easily sidestep. They really contribute to this significant cumulative effect that can totally reshape how a visitor feels about their trip. Well, each individual charge, maybe that shocking $12 latte, or the eye-watering $26 water, or that frustrating $60 early check-in fee might seem, manageable on its own if you grit your teeth. Their collective impact dramatically inflates the actual cost of staying there. It often pushes the total bill way beyond what you expected from the advertised room rate. And that leads to this pervasive feeling of dissatisfaction, this feeling of being exploited throughout the entire trip. Think of it like this. Imagine buying a really beautiful, expensive gift. You're thrilled with it. But then to actually open the box, you have to pay a small fee. Then another fee to use the scissors. Then another fee for them to take away the wrapping paper. Individually, maybe they're small, but together, they create this experience of constant friction and annoyance. It's that relentless feeling of being nickel and dimed that can truly poison the vacation, even if the big experiences, the shows or the meals, are actually enjoyable. This constant chipping away at your wallet fosters this feeling of always being upsold, even for the most basic things. It can fundamentally undermine that relaxed, indulgent, carefree vibe that Vegas traditionally tries to sell. It breeds vigilance and resentment, which is pretty much the opposite of what you want on vacation.
Right. So when you start factoring in these unexpected, often unavoidable costs, like just needing water or the very practical need to check in early after a long flight, how much does that fundamentally change your perceived value of a Las Vegas trip compared to other places? Does the magic and the allure of the Strip start to, tarnish a bit when every little convenience comes with such an inflated price tag? It risks shifting Vegas from being this destination of pure fun and escape to one where you're constantly doing mental math, guarding your wallet, maybe feeling a bit defensive about every single transaction. And now let's talk about what one of your sources actually calls the Las Vegas Strip's most ridiculous fee yet. This particular charge, which they say, quote, takes things to another level, is apparently found at some of the really high-end properties on the Strip, and it truly is something else. Get ready for this one. Okay, the fee we're talking about is an operation charge for something they call classic service, when you order room service at the Bellagio, a top MGM property. Now, you might initially think, okay, room service, it's a luxury, I expect it to be expensive. Fair enough. But this is specifically a $25 fee applied just for the, quote, luxury of receiving real plates, silverware, glassware, and linen napkins.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to pause on the sheer irony and absurdity here. The waiter doesn't stay and serve you. You are simply paying an extra $25 just to have your meal delivered on proper, reusable dishes with actual cutlery instead of, say, disposables. It's not for some white glove personal service. It's literally just for the plates and forks. And believe it or not, it gets even weirder. There's an alternative they call takeout service. With this option, you choose to go down to the restaurant yourself, pick up your food, bring it back to your room, and eat it out of boxes with plastic utensils. Even this self-service option where you do all the legwork, it still incurs a $10 charge, which is described as a fee to not deliver your meal or have to pick up actual plates and silverware. So you're paying them $10 for the privilege of doing it all yourself and using disposables. And apparently this isn't just a one-off at Bellagio. Social media reports mentioned in the sources indicate other high-end spots like the Cosmopolitan and Mandalay Bay are doing the same kind of thing.
Wow. This specific fee, it really does crystallize the current direction, maybe, of luxury hospitality pricing in Vegas. And it forces you to ask a really vital question. What does this kind of explicit unbundling say about the whole concept of luxury service, especially in a place known for extravagance? Is room service no longer inherently supposed to include the very things that, for generations, have kind of defined it? It fundamentally redraws the expectations around a premium experience. I mean, when you're staying at a high-end place like the Bellagio, the built-in assumption has always been that a certain level of refinement, a certain standard of service, is just part of the deal, baked into the price of the room and the food itself. To then slap on an extra fee just for real plates and silverware, things that have historically been inseparable from the very idea of room service in a luxury hotel, it creates this profound psychological disconnect. It can lead to disbelief, maybe even anger, where guests feel like they're being charged for something that absolutely should be a basic, unspoken amenity at that level.
It's almost like paying for a fancy dinner and then being told that using the fork and knife is an extra charge. It's almost comical in how bold it is, yet deeply frustrating for the person paying. And from a broader industry viewpoint, yeah, this suggests a really profound rethinking of what's considered basic versus what's now an add-on luxury, even at the most ocular end of the market. It's a very clear shift away from an all-inclusive luxury feel towards an extreme a la carte model, where almost every single component, no matter how fundamental it seems, becomes a potential upsell. This deeply challenges the very definition of premium service, and it makes you wonder, where does this trend end? What's next? A charge for using the towels in your room? A fee to turn on the shower in your five-star suite? It really tests the limits of what guests will tolerate before that whole illusion of luxury just completely falls apart.
Okay, let's really unpack this. Could this dishware fee, as bizarre as it sounds, actually become a precedent? Could it become a trend that filters down into other luxury areas, not just in Vegas, but maybe globally? Are we genuinely moving towards a future where even the most fundamental parts of service that used to define premium hospitality just become separate line items on the bill? And what does that mean for the definition of premium itself? As a consumer, someone who values a quality experience, how will you react to this changing landscape? It really forces us all to reconsider our expectations of what we're actually paying for, even at the highest levels of service, and how we budget for those kinds of experiences. Now, it's interesting. It's not just frustrated tourists or travel writers who are noticing and complaining about these really aggressive pricing tactics. Your sources show that within the Las Vegas industry itself, there's some growing pushback. Key leaders are actually publicly criticizing resorts for piling on too many fees. They seem to understand the potential long-term damage this approach could do to the city's brand and its power to attract visitors. It's definitely not a united front, everyone doesn't agree. But there is a clear and pretty vocal group sounding the alarm from the inside. And to illustrate this internal debate, let me share a direct quote that really stood out. It's from Leora Azuli. She is the president of Incentives by Design, Inc., a company based right there in Las Vegas. She told the Las Vegas Review-Journal quite directly, there are several of us in the industry that are very supportive of getting some kind of moratorium on resort fees. Anything we can do to get the people to come back is important because right now there is at least a perception that we're overpricing people. That's a really powerful statement, isn't it? Especially coming from someone deeply embedded in that local tourism world. It shows a recognition that the current path might be unsustainable and maybe even damaging in the long run.
Yeah, what truly stands out to me there is that call for a moratorium coming from inside the industry. That's not outside critics. That's an insider raising a red flag about a serious systemic risk. It means the problem isn't just severe, it's also highly visible. and it's actively starting to impact the city's ability to pull people in and keep them coming back. When an industry insider speaks out like that, it usually signals a deeper worry about the collective brand image, the overall reputation of Las Vegas as a top-tier destination. It's a recognition that the combined effect of individual resorts decisions can actually harm the whole ecosystem. The challenge, of course, is how do you actually implement a moratorium on fees that have, let's be honest, become really significant, often crucial revenue streams for these huge casino companies. These fees were brought in and they've been hiked up frequently, precisely because they add a lot to the bottom line, especially now that non-gaming revenue is so important. It's a tough calculation for them. How do you roll back a key revenue source without hurting profitability? But as Azuli rightly points out, that emphasis on the perception that we're overpricing people is absolutely critical. In consumer behavior, perception often is reality. If enough people feel exploited, regardless of the resort's cost structures or their need for revenue, they'll just choose to go somewhere else. This internal criticism really highlights that growing tension between short-term money grabs and the long-term health and sustainability of the whole Las Vegas tourism economy. It's a strategic bind that reveals a deeper, maybe even existential debate happening within the industry.
That tension is absolutely clear, isn't it? That classic short-term gain versus long-term sustainability problem. But it also brings up a contrasting, yet maybe complementary view from the academic side. This perspective suggests that price isn't the only thing that determines whether visitors come back. It challenges the idea that just cutting prices or fees will magically fix everything. What we pay, however frustrating it might be sometimes, isn't always the only factor when it comes to attracting people and keeping them loyal. It's not just about the numbers on the final bill, but how you genuinely feel about the entire experience, start to finish. Let's hear directly from Amanda Bellarmino. She's an assistant professor at UNLV's William F. Harrah College of Hospitality, a really authoritative voice on this stuff. She told the Review Journal, "Consumer satisfaction has consistently been found to have an impact on loyalty and repeat intentions, more so than value itself. Value is one aspect of satisfaction, but price is not value. Creating value is about creating memorable experiences, and that we continue to do in abundance." So her argument essentially is that Vegas is still delivering those amazing experiences despite the higher prices, and that's what truly keeps people coming back, those memorable moments.
Professor Bellarmino's statement is incredibly insightful, definitely. But it also raises a really important and complex question, doesn't it? Can Las Vegas truly keep delivering on those memorable experiences if consumers feel constantly nickeled and dimed or undervalued by this barrage of fees and hidden costs? Because that directly impacts their overall satisfaction. Bellarmino is absolutely right to draw that distinction between price, the dollar amount, and value, which is the perceived worth or benefit you get. And she correctly emphasizes that memorable experiences are the real drivers of loyalty and repeat visits. That's fundamental hospitality thinking. But the inherent tension here is critical. Can that abundance of unique entertainment, amazing dining, luxury experiences that Vegas definitely offers, can it genuinely outweigh the growing perception of being overcharged and squeezed at every opportunity? Is there a tipping point where the cumulative negative feeling from all these fees actually starts to detract from the memorability and enjoyment of the experience itself? Think about the peak end theory in psychology. It suggests people judge an experience mainly based on how they felt at its peak, the most intense moment, and at its end. Well, if the end of your Vegas trip is staring at a confusing, frustrating bill loaded with unexpected charges, that negative end experience can seriously overshadow earlier positive peaks, making you less likely to want to go back. So the resorts might be gambling, right? They might be betting that the unique allure of Vegas, its sheer scale, the nonstop action, that only in Vegas's vibe will always pull people in, even with these extra fees. The critical question for the industry, and really for you as a traveler trying to make smart choices, is whether this aggressive pricing strategy is accidentally chipping away at the very foundation of customer satisfaction and loyalty they absolutely need for long-term success. If the frustration over costs becomes a more prominent, more visceral part of the memory of the trip than the amazing show or the fantastic meal, then Bellarmino's point about memorable experiences might actually be getting undermined by the very pricing tactics meant to boost short-term revenue. It's a really delicate balance, and the current decline suggests that balance might be tipping the wrong way, forcing the industry to think hard about at what point these fees just completely erode the very value they believe they're still providing.
So what does this all boil down to for you? As a traveler, as a consumer trying to navigate today's travel world, how do you weigh that upfront price of a trip against the overall value and, maybe just as importantly, the emotional quality of the whole experience? Are you willing to pay more for a truly memorable adventure, kind of absorbing these extra, often unexpected costs? Or does that constant stream of unexpected fees just chip away at the good memories and ultimately your desire to return? It really forces you to redefine what you consider a good deal and to question whether that perceived abundance of experiences is truly worth the total and often quite murky cost of getting it. Hashtag outro. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's pretty clear the Las Vegas Strip is facing this undeniable slump in tourism and sales. It's a trend that's now consistently stretched out for months. And it's not just a simple economic downturn, is it? It seems to be this complex mix of rising base prices, those ubiquitous and often surprising fees. I mean, everything from daily parking to that truly wild room service operation charge for just using dishes and what some people inside the industry are flat out calling shady pricing practices. We have seen that internal conflict bubbling up within the industry itself, caught in this tough spot between the obvious short-term goal of maximizing revenue and the crucial long-term need to keep customers happy and ensure they remain loyal.
Yeah, looking at the bigger picture, the Las Vegas Strip really finds itself at this fascinating, maybe precarious crossroads. It serves as a really vivid, real-world case study in that delicate balance between aggressive, maybe even predatory revenue generation and the absolute necessity of preserving the unique magic, the allure, and the perceived value that brought visitors there in the first place. The industry as a whole, they really need to think carefully about whether this continued, relentless pursuit of every last dime is actually a sustainable long-term strategy. Or does it risk inadvertently eroding the very memorable experiences they claim they still provide in abundance? And by doing that, fundamentally damaging their long-term visitor base. It feels like a real moment of reckoning for a city that's always prided itself on being able to evolve, adapt, and constantly redefine entertainment.
And for you, our listener, hopefully this deep dive gives you some powerful insight into those often hidden costs of travel and the intricate psychology of pricing that plays out in major destinations like Vegas. It encourages you, maybe, to look beyond just the headline price and really consider the full financial and experiential picture when you're planning your next trip. Being informed about these kinds of pervasive tactics can help you budget more accurately, maybe anticipate some of those frustrating hidden charges, and ultimately make travel choices that genuinely line up with what you expect in terms of value and enjoyment. And here's maybe a final thought to chew on. Here's where it gets really interesting. If a place like Las Vegas, a city meticulously constructed on the very ideas of escapism, luxury, indulgence, if it's struggling with visitor numbers, specifically because of these kinds of pricing strategies, what does that imply for the broader travel and hospitality industry around the world? Could this trend, this constant unbundling of services, this relentless layering on of fees, could it be a sign of more widespread changes in how we're going to expect to pay for experiences, even at the highest levels of service? And critically, how will you successfully navigate that evolving landscape as a savvy traveler, always looking for real, transparent value that goes beyond just the initial advertised cost? Something to definitely ponder on your next journey.